Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish as we close in on show number 200 and the 2025 Bassmaster Classic, where we had a fantastic meet and greet with Frank Scalish with a one-of-a-kind signature series.
Dude, it was so good.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. What I'm amazed at, and we talked a little bit about this in last week's show, recorded show today, first day of competition for the third stop of the Bassmaster Opens Division 2 on Lake Norfolk in what state is that in? Arkansas. I'm there now.
I love your no approach. I love your no approach method.
Long story short, we had a great classic. We bloviated about that on the show last week, and we're back with get back into a little technical stuff and a little announcement stuff on Day 4, Frank.
Yeah, we got today's show is going to be really cool because it's going to be about nothing more than looking around you. That's the what do you call it? The teaser.
Yeah,
looking
being
around
observant.
You, being observant.
Like there's something there. So I have one tree in my front yard, and that tree, there's something happening to that tree. And when we were going over show topics, you were like, "Bingo!" That's a prime example of what we're going to talk about today. Well, you go ahead and tell the name of the show. I mean, we're in the show, Frank.
Okay, so we're gonna yeah, exactly. What am I doing?
What are we teasing it for? This is the show,
right? Okay, so my bad. You could tell in the spring what the fish are doing simply by looking at the environment around you. For example, when we were driving down to the Classic, Frankie and I drove from Ohio to Fort Worth. We got into Kentucky, and I said, "Look at that, dude." I said, "You see them? You see those purple trees right there? And the daffodils coming up?" I said, "You could literally fish no deeper than 8 feet and catch fish." He's like, "How do you know?" I go, "Because the trees are telling me. The trees are telling me what's going on." That's the beauty part about the spring is nature doesn't lie. Even though the weather has been fluctuating a lot, nature never lies. And so what's happening is I said, look, the air temperatures have been stable, which means the water temperatures are warming. They've been having heavy winds, which means the water is going to circulate. So the warm water that's on the surface layers now circulating throughout. The water is going to start to be warmer, deeper. Those bass have that urge for springtime movement. Days are getting longer, et cetera, et cetera. And this is not seeing any of the water. By the time we got to Texas, there's other things that were happening, and we'll get into that in a minute. But by the time we got to Texas, I told Frankie there's a strong possibility that this tournament could be won shallower than 8 feet. And it almost
was. Yeah,
it almost was.
There. I think the wind really had a big factor on a lot of that shallow stuff warming up. But basically, you're pre-fishing on your way to work is what this episode is kind of about. What we'll dive into. Also, speaking of diving, there's a new lure that dives, and your next signature series color, which we teased last week, drops today on lurenet.com.
It is St. Clair Orange. This is part of the St. Clair collection. It is St. Clair Orange. And you guys know from previous conversations, this is actually modeled after a crayfish that is here up north. It's not just in St. Clair, but it's very, very prevalent in St. Clair. This is an exact duplicate of that animal. So I'm really excited about it. I actually have to get some on my own. I only have a couple of them to fish with, and I want to get more so I could fish with them. Because this is a special color right there.
Limited 300, available on lurenet.com. Make sure you use the code capital BTL25 to get 15% off regularly priced items. And in all likelihood, you got about well, less than 24 hours before these things are gone.
Yeah, in all likelihood, you probably have about 5.5.
Could be less, could be more.
Right. We don't know for sure.
And then you put that on the speed end, which yes. I know we've kind of hashed this over, but this is a kind of a 2-for-1 if you're a collector, because you had a hand in designing that speed end, which correct. As a prototype, right when it came out, almost won the Bassmaster Classic on Lake Gunnersville 5 springs ago.
Correct. And the timing of this release couldn't be more perfect because this bait excels right now. That's when this bait was designed for. Up north, we're a little bit behind, but it's perfect for what's going on. In the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's perfect for what's going to be going on. So go ahead.
Like, let's say you're on St. Clair, because it's modeled after a St. Clair craw. And I've only fished St. Clair 3 or 4 times in my life. Where are you, like, what type of stuff are you throwing this on early in the season on St. Clair? Like, are you up in the river on rock, or are you in current? Are you out on flats? Like, if let's just pick St. Clair, like, where would you tie that on St. Clair?
So if I'm on St. Clair, I'm going to the flats. Because all the smallmouth are staging. They're going to be staging to spawn. The bait on 12-pound fluoro will run about 7 feet. On a good cast, you can get it down 8. It excels, from banging it off the rocks in 6 inches of water all the way down to 7 feet. The beauty part about this bait is you could snap it through the grass. And so here's what I'm going to look for. Marina mouth dredges, where they dredge the marina mouths. If you watched last week's show, I talked about a smallmouth pattern that happens where the smallmouth will go to these marinas. Largemouth will go there too, but smallmouth, okay? So they'll use the dredge edges on the way into these marinas. And here on the Great Lakes, on Lake St. Clair, any of your sandy or natural lake makeups, there's siltation that occurs because of wind and current. The sand moves. All right. So they have to keep dredging these areas out. And so the dredged edges are very defined. It's a very great pattern. If you go to some inland lakes that have a lot of clay flats on them, the homeowners, when they put the docks in, they'll make a dredge to the dock. Those also are really applicable for the speed end. So these can translate in other areas other than Lake St. Clair, but here's specifically what I'm looking for. As the smallies get closer to spawning, okay, they're going to look for sandy areas with scattered rock and scattered grass, which this bait excels in those areas. So that's what I'm looking for. Matt, you brought up the Gunnersville tournament. The guys were fishing the scattered grass adjacent to the spawning flats at Gunnersville.
Marina mouths.
That's
dredged out so they could get the big, right, that's where Blaylock was throwing it?
Yeah, 100%. And here, I'll tell you a funny story about that. Because we all fish, so we all know. They literally got these baits a couple days before the Classic. Okay. They threw them untested at the Classic. Like, these guys didn't have these baits to fish with prior to that event. That's how much confidence they had in them, and that's how good they were. They literally threw the baits without being able to fish them prior to that event.
Mm-hmm.
That goes a long way when they are now throwing them during competition in that arena.
Okay, so hold up that St. Clair. What is it called?
St. Clair Orange.
Okay, hold up St. Clair Orange, and I want to compare these colors to the Crackle Bone color that was like the one-off that you did at the Classic. So there's the two baits right there.
Correct.
So let's say I'm on a flat in the pre-spawn and it's ideal. In your experience, will there be times where they will it'll be a 2-to-1, a 3-to-1 for a guy who's throwing, say, a shad light bait fish pattern like this, as opposed to a crayfish pattern?
Yeah, 100%. So here's what I do. Usually in the spring, I'm on the crawdad.
Okay.
Once the spawn starts to take place, or I'll say when the spawn is starting, you'll see a few on beds, still be a lot of pre-spawn activity. I'm on the crayfish. Once the bass start to go on the beds in numbers, I'm going back to the shad patterns, because now they're chasing stuff out of their nests, the bluegills, some of your black-nosed dace, some of the egg eaters, they're running them off the beds. And then after the spawn, post-spawn, they'll start to gorge again on and the primary food source is shad or minnows. Let's just call them minnows, because it could be, dace, it could be shore minnows, it could be shad, alewives, emeralds, whatever. So we'll say minnows. They go back onto the minnows again as they start to progress their way offshore. They'll go back to minnows, and so that's what I usually do. So I'll use my crawdads, early in the season, all the way to the spawn. You could get away with having both colors tied on right after the spawn, because they've been shallow enough and they've been pecking crayfish enough where you could probably get bit on both. But there's going to be a time when the shad bite starts to take over, and that's usually what I found is usually post spawn.
I like that. I know there's a number of diehard BTL Day 4 listeners that are trying to make sure that they have all 12 of this limited edition collection. Yeah. So in the comments underneath this, like if you need one,
so if you need one, you can go on, you could write on the comment section if you need one, and a lot of guys buy multiples so they could trade back and forth with you, or you can go on eBay. There's a lot of them going on eBay right now for the guys that bought more than a handful.
Yep. There you go.
You locked up on.
I know I locked up. A little internet glitch. If you remember 3-4 months ago, I had some issues, Frank.
Oh yeah, they're back.
It's like you got a puppy and you're training the puppy, right? But then, the puppy hasn't nipped in a while or done something. And then all of a sudden you're like, maybe there's maybe we need to do a little bit more training here. So, but you're back. Okay. So I understood what was going on and carried the conversation while I was away.
100%, dude. Slid into it like I was sliding into second base.
There you go. Anyway, yeah.
When I had knees.
Yep. Long story short, I know there's a group of BTL listeners that are doing it. In the comments on here, if you know what color you're looking for, put a comment down. There could be someone else that is listening that has a couple of those. You guys can trade. You guys can swap on those colors. So, the goal is for as many people as possible to enjoy your one-of-a-kind creations. So
100%.
Something else that I do want to talk about really quick before we get into the meat of today's show is that the BTL St. Jude t-shirt is live. This is the fourth consecutive year that we've done this. 100% of the proceeds go to support St. Jude. There it is. The link is in the description of the show. You can also go to basstalklive.com. Click on the apparel link. You'll go right down here. You see the St. Jude fundraiser, $29.95. A bunch of different colors you can select. I know that at the Classic, we saw a lot of people that had these on, but all of this goes to support the St. Jude 100%. And it also runs through the Dick Hiley St. Jude Bass Classic, so they know that you're a bass fisherman who's supporting it through that. So if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, let me know. But a new design for that t-shirt, wanted everybody to be aware of that and encourage them after they get their limited edition St. Clair Orange Craw at 15% off by using capital BTL at checkout. Head over to the Bass Talk Live apparel store and pick up a couple of those and support a good cause. So
perfection. Couldn't have said it better.
I know, that was really smooth. I didn't even have any notes on that. All right, let's dive into today's topic, signs of the spawn.
Okay, so here we go. And I have this in order of importance, which is really crazy. because we literally just made this up before we went on air. But it is ingrained.
No, we didn't. I mean, we talked about, we decided on the topic before we recorded, but
correct.
Like I said, you're having the conversation. We had actually had it at the Classic where you were like, man, this could be a spawning deal. Like, we just drove 17 hours and you could definitely see the things changing.
Oh, yeah,
so I put that in the back of my mind. I was like, that'd be a good like short little show that just gives some guys, you're on your way to the office. How are you going to get better at fish? Here's some signs.
Oh yeah. It's money. And here, look, this is accurate. This is like way accurate. So nature will never lie to you. Okay. Everybody, I hear it all the time. Oh, the spring's unusually cold. They're going to be spawned later. Oh, this is happening. They're going to do this differently and all this crap. But all you got to do is open your eyeballs and look. So here's the first thing that happens. If you're out and about and you know, especially if you live up north, that the most of the lawns here will be look mostly brownish. Fields will be brownish. The first thing that starts to change is you'll notice that you'll start to see some green mixing in with the browns. I'll call it the winter browns. Okay, you'll start to see some greens mixing in. That means that things are starting to happen. You're still going to have your cold water applications, your jerk baits, your shaken minnows, etc. You're still going to have your cold water periods. Bass are going to be out. Some bass are going to be staging to move in. They'll be in those drains like we talk about in depth on a million other shows. That's starting. Okay. The next thing you're going to see is the willow trees are going to start to get buds on them. Everything for the most part is still fairly brown, but the willow trees will start getting little green buds on them. They won't look green like the color green, but they'll be yellowish, but you'll notice all the buds coming alive. That's stage 2. That means now the bass are probably staging a little bit closer to where they're going to spawn. They're getting more predictable for the shallower bites. And when I say shallower, that's going to be relative to the lake you're fishing and the water clarity normally in the lake. Okay, so that's what you're going to start to see. Then you're going to notice purple blooms on some of the trees. And when you start to see the purple blooms, those fish are within range. They're getting within casting range of the banks. Exactly. They're getting within casting range of the banks. I'm all over the board.
You deal with a lot of blanks in the painting world, so that's
exactly. Now what's happening is now you can start throwing your crankbaits. You could start, getting really more traditional with the chatterbaits, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the key. This is the key. When you start to see the white flowers blooming on the trees and daffodils blooming, you are right on the edge of the spawn. This is when it goes down. I don't mean seeing 1 or 2. I mean, when you see all the white trees in bloom, it's going down.
Okay? I'm going to go take a picture. You need to talk for 30 seconds. I'm going to take a picture of what's in my front yard right now, Frank.
Do it. It's perfect. So by looking at the nature and what's going on around you, you kind of get a good prediction of how it's happening. Just like in the morning on your way to a tournament, if you see the deer moving, you see a bunch of turkeys, the squirrels are out, animals are doing their thing, that bite is going to be good that day because everything in nature is lining up. There's activity. It's going. You're going to be in good shape. Conversely, if you go out, like I was in a deer stand a few years ago and they had all these tornado warnings. I didn't see a chipmunk, nothing moving. And I got really lucky because 2 coyotes jumped a deer out of a thicket that I was by and I got to shoot the deer. Then if it wasn't for the coyotes, the deer would have never moved. So by looking at the nature of things, you could you could predict where in the fishing world things are taking place. So, okay, so the white trees are important and blooming daffodils are important. All right, what do you got? Oh yeah, there it is. Oh yeah, that's it right there in a nutshell. That's perfect. That's so perfect. When you see that, you know it's happening.
That's literally my front yard right now.
Yeah, it's happening. I mean, you could literally, you don't have to fish deeper than 8 feet ever now.
I feel like while I was taking that, I missed a really cool story about deer and coyotes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking about how when you get up in the morning and you're driving to the lake, when you see all the animals running around, you see deer out, turkey out, everything's moving, squirrels, chipmunks, everything.
Yep.
You know the bite's going to be good on that one.
Yeah, so I've did the same thing. I've talked about this a little bit on the show before. Every time when I was driving, when I used to fish the Wednesday nighters at Thunderbird, there's a kind of a naturey country stretch that's about 14 miles that once you got outside of Norman before you got to the lake. And if there was a lot, this is a little morbid, but it's the truth. If there was a lot of fresh roadkill, because I wouldn't go out and like practice during the week. Like if I could tell, if I'd see 2 or 3 raccoons, a couple possums, and some skunks on the way there that had met their maker in the last 20, I knew that it was going to be a good evening.
Yeah, because
if the roads were completely clear of ill-timed road crossings, that told me that they weren't moving as much. Which I mean goes back to the old school, like if the cows are laying, what is that? If the cows are laying down in the pasture,
rain. Yeah, it's gonna rain. Yeah, 100%. The animals don't lie. Nature doesn't lie. Like I said, it just doesn't lie. The trick that you guys got to realize is. Water conditions could throw a monkey wrench in where you're going to fish, not what the fish are doing, but in where you need to be successful. So if you have an unusually wet spring, going up the river is probably not a wise choice because cold, dirty water has a tendency to make the fish in a negative mood. Doesn't mean you can't catch them there, but you may have to go to, big bladed spinner baits, slow the roll, et cetera, where as you go towards the dam, the lake gets more stable. The most stable section of a lake is by the dam. Okay. So you could take into other weather conditions to dictate where you're going to start your search for them. Like I said, things are warming up now. So the water clarity is going to be less of an issue as the lake gets warmer and warmer and warmer. And if the lake is notoriously off color all the time, it probably won't affect them.
One of the things in the spring that I've heard a lot of old timers, I'm not calling you an old timer, I just say that I've talked about is they'll talk about a cold rain or a warm rain.
Yes.
And throughout most of the country, you could either have, it's not hot outside yet. So you could have a cold front that comes through where it rains, or you could have, one of these kind of chaotic tornadic situations, but there is no dramatic drop in temperature. In your opinion, how does, whether it's a warm rain or a cold rain, which you can tell either by going outside or looking at it, you don't have to be on the lake, impact the water temperature and fish behavior specifically during this kind of critical time of the year when fish are transitioning and getting up shallow?
Okay, so clearly the warm rain is what you want in the spring.
Okay.
Unless, of course, you're like Jason Christie in the MPFL who seeked out colder water because he didn't want those fish to be spawning when he was there, which was brilliant, by the way.
Yeah, that was pretty smart.
And so clearly you're going to want the warmer rain because that's going to put warmer water throughout that shallow water area. Now, understand this. A bass that is staging in 10, 12 feet of water that hasn't moved up yet isn't going to notice anything different.
That's what I was wondering. How fast does that work? Like if it rains, like how fast will that temperature? Like if let's say it's going a degree a day. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is.
In the spring. Then let's say you get a half inch of warm rain to where if the water temperature is 56 and that rain comes in at 70, how much quicker will that, or is that minimalized?
No, it's not minimalized at
Okay.
all, because you could literally have a jump in certain pockets when we talk about live drains, and we showed you on the deep dive app the live
Yep.
drains coming in. You could literally use the deep dive app, look for the live drain, look at the water clarity section in the deep dive app, and you could see which creeks are getting clean inflow and which ones are getting dirty inflow. Very important. So when you're sitting there and you're saying, well, we got a warm rain, 70-degree rain, and water temperature is 56 degrees, it'll probably jump up about 6 or 7 degrees from that warm range in that pocket area where the drain is coming in. Okay. A big bump in water temperature warmth like that could literally put those fish on the beds instantly. Like if they're cruising roaming, you see a lot of cruisers roaming, that's a sign that they're looking and they're going to get ready to set up. But that immediate influx of warm temperature will lock them right down. I found that if I go out and we've had a 7 or an 8 degree bump in water temperature in the spring, it usually sets them off. That usually puts them right down the beds. Understanding this, that happens to the fish that are already in that shallow water zone.
Yep.
The fish that are still staging, because you always have, here's another thing, nature will not wipe itself out. So they all don't spawn at the same time. You have waves of spawners that come in. Your main lake, the fish that live on the main lake that never go to the creeks, and your pelagics that roam all the time, those are the last spawners you're going to get. And those are usually main lake spawners. And that usually occurs more in the dam section of the lake, the lower third of the lake.
And main lake spawners means they're not going to be back in a protected pocket
Correct.
that you have to idle into or way back tucked in somewhere. They will literally spawn
on the
main lake.
Yeah, 100%. And here's another thing, since we're talking about spawners. Here's another thing about main lake spawners. Unless it's a natural grass lake, and I have to preface this, unless it's a natural grass lake, most of the time on your main lake, you'll find 1 or 2 fish here or 1 or 2 fish there. You're not going to roll in and find a field of bass spawning. Like on St. Clair, you can go on some of those flats during the spawn and you'll see smallmouth spawning in a lot of places. Like you'll see 20 or 30 of them. That natural structured lakes without grass don't behave that way. They spawn in certain areas, and there's only a few fish in each little area that they spawn in. But back to the original thing, nature's not going to wipe itself out. So you've got stages. Back in the old days when I started fishing Bassmasters, I actually, sight fishing was probably my weakest venue. So I avoided it. I always fished for pre-spawners or post-spawners. I kind of avoided the spawn. And you can find fish in those 3 stages completely throughout the entire spawn. But here's the problem in a tournament situation. If they're spawning, you have to go look for them, because when they're spawning, you can pick out the ones you want to catch.
Right.
And so you're culling before you even catch one. This burned me too many times fishing Bassmasters to ignore it any longer. So I became a sight fishing junkie till I learned how to do it well. And so it's just another tool. But yeah, I mean, this time of year is fun. This is
3 weeks ago, we actually did a show that takes a literal deep dive using that deep dive app into areas that you need to look at when it gets on it. You mentioned the looking at it. If you were to pick, let's say you're getting on the water, you don't want to just go look at them. You want to be casting, you want to be fishing, tree in your front yard's blooming, watch a coyote attack a deer on your way to the lake. The signs are there, and you put your boat in. What are some search baits that you can get feedback on to say, okay, there are fish up shallow that are showing themselves, where you can get a couple a couple bites.
Perfect. So chatterbait can't be ignored. The speed end and a square bill can't be ignored. People have gotten away from a spinnerbait, but they're out of their minds to not be throwing a spinnerbait. Those are my search baits, and fluke style baits.
Okay.
A lot of people will go to the floating worm versus the fluke, but
Okay.
here's what that does. That'll show you fish. That's what all these search baits do. They show you fish. They show you where the fish are at. But here's a trick. So you could take a floating worm, or a fluke style bait, and
like a Houdini shad.
Yeah, Houdini shad.
Finesse 6-inch finesse worm, even a dinger, like a wacky rig dinger. That type of thing.
Well, okay, so yeah, and wacky rig is the key. The wacky rig dinger is the key, because that's going to pull fish up when they hit it. You're going to be able to see. So what I'll do is, if I think there's some spawning activity going around, you can't see the fish very good. The bigger ones have a tendency to spawn what I call the invisible zone, just out of your sight. And so if you're up there and you can see the bottom everywhere, okay, you could see the bottom everywhere, and you see smaller bass spawning, you're on top of the ones you want to catch. You're on top of them. And so I did this with Josh one time at a local lake here. There were tons of 1.5-pounders, 2-pounders spawning. And I said, "You want to laugh?" And he goes, "What's that?" I backed the boat way off and I went to this pocket. It was actually a dead end pocket. It didn't have a drain in it. It was a dead end pocket. I went in the back of that pocket. I pulled the boat way off and I told him, "Cast where you can't see the bottom." And so we were throwing 5-inch dingers on flick shake head. And
of the old flick shake.
Right. And we were throwing Houdini shads. And so when you'd work the Houdini shad and you go dunk 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 dunk, and it darts, every now and then you'll have one wants to rock up on you and then float back down. You'll see a bass flare on it or flash on it. That's one that was bedding where you couldn't see him, came up to bump that bait away from the bed. Then pick up the flick shake and fire it out there and let it sink down, and then boom, you get them. And so we went from catching 1.5 to 2-pounders to be catching, 3-pounders and plus, because we are now targeting the bigger ones that were in that invisible zone. But I see a lot of guys make the mistake. They see the smaller ones on the bed and they run up there right away and they start looking around up there. Now, every now and then you'll find a good one up there if she's got the right cover to put the bed by. Those beds, the bigger bass, shallow, are never going to be just in a wide open spot. They're always going to have some object next to the bed. Something that gives them a safety factor next to the bed. That's another trick to look for the bigger ones that you could see. Dock poles, overhanging trees. Doesn't mean the tree's in the water, but it's overhanging, so the bass got some form of cover over their head. These are just
that's like a hawk eagle thing, to where they don't want to have to worry about an osprey coming down from over them and plucking them right out of the water,
right,
or a raccoon or whatever.
Right. It's safety. It's for safety. But yeah, I mean, it's, the break-in shad, Houdini shad, if you're a Yum fanatic, super fluke, if you're a Zoom fanatic.
Or are you going to go with like a bold color? Because I'm looking at the break-in shad and I put it up there before.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for it, like that's a great option.
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. I lean on my pearl white, a shad imitator, exactly, and then the bubblegum color. And the bubblegum color to me will give me in off-colored water, it'll help me see the bait better, basically.
Weightless or with a little swivel up in front?
Nail weight. Usually I do a nail weight, but I play with the size of the nail weight, because what I want to be able to do is control the bait when I use it like a jerk bait. I just do little twitches and pauses and twitches and pauses.
Okay, so you putting the nail weight in from the backside up towards the nose right there,
Yeah,
after you Texas rig it?
Right. I put the nail weight going in. No, I put the nail weight going in head first to
like
the
where
back.
my mouth is, where my
Yes,
mouth is, and then
right there.
that way.
Yeah. Well, but I'll put it in so it's facing the back. So when I'm jerking it, it won't have
I
a
see what
tendency
you're
to
saying.
pull the nail out of it.
Yep. Okay.
And the other thing is, don't use, a lot of guys get carried away with hook size. I don't use a big giant hook in it, 2/0, 3/0. I don't want a big hook in that. I want the fish to get it and get the hook in the roof of their mouth. I don't want them to roll it sideways.
And
The
and
big,
erratic.
yes, the big gap on the hook, if they bite down on it, has a tendency to roll the bait sideways, and you could miss a fish that way.
Okay.
And that's really kind of it.
And you want that bait coming up, diving down, coming back up. You want that bait to show you where the fish are.
Right, to show me where those fish are at. And then you could back off with the flick shake rig or a Ned rig and catch them. And the crankbaits, chatterbaits, fabulous search tools.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of the best spring days ever just throwing a chatterbait last year. It was amazing.
Really? Just steady.
I was mostly bumping bottom with it. They weren't spawning. It was major pre-spawn. Still pretty cold out. They weren't spawning yet, but boy, were they right there. In fact, I'll tell you how close they were. 3 days later, I went back and they were spawning. And so that's how close they were. But the day that we hit it was just, holy moly. I had 2 baits out. I had a chatterbait and a black and blue jig. And I caught the biggest one I caught was on the jig. It was 5/8. And I had a bunch of 3 3/4, 4.5 pounders on the chatterbait. And probably caught 70 or 80.
One thing I want to kind of point you in the direction of and get your opinion on is it can be one of the most exciting times of the year when you are visually making contact with some of the biggest fish in the lake, or when you're trying to find it. But it can also be one of the most frustrating times of the year that I've experienced, where you're looking at fish of a lifetime, or you're looking at pairs of big fish and you're going, why can I not get these fish to eat my offerings? Why can I not catch them? I know the big thing is when they're rolling together, there are times when it is impossible. And then it seems like sometimes you go and they spin right around and eat it, or you're twitching your jerkbait or fluke and they come right up and eat it. If you are out during this time of year on this pattern, how can you identify catchable fish versus fish that are not catchable?
Okay, so the crazy enough thing is this. Cruising fish are the hardest to catch. They're constantly moving. You cast at them, they go the other way. They're the hardest ones to catch. When that happens, I'm making Mugambo long casts, little lighter line than normal. I'm trying to stay as far away from them as I can. And there's nothing you can do but keep casting because they're the hardest. When I see fish on a bed, that's a lot easier to predict because I can pitch in there and see exactly the bass's behavior, whether or not it's catchable or not. Here, the first clue is this. If I see a bed and I see the bass, and if this is the bed, let's go, this is the bed. Okay, if this is the bed, and the bass is on the bed, and I make that cast, and the bass swims away, and then he swims out here, and it swims over here, and then it kind of comes back, and it's like that. That fish is catchable, but it's probably going to take you way too long to catch it because every time you cast in on him, he leaves. Mm-hmm. If I see a bass that's sitting there and I cast to it, and it just goes like this and right back, or like out here and back, that fish is going to get caught. So what I'll do is, you got to realize something. If you're targeting the bed, and I don't have a good thing with me, but if you're targeting the bed, there's literally a spot about the size of a 50-cent piece in that bed. That is the trigger. That's where the fish, if that bait goes there, that fish is taking it and moving it out of the way, for sure. So if I pitch in and the fish's pectoral fins start to move and his dorsal fin goes up, or her dorsal fin goes up, that fish is going to be caught. Yeah, it's going to be caught within the next 3 casts. And so I'll stay on it. But if you throw and you throw and you throw and you throw, that fish doesn't move, it's not paying attention. Now what you have to determine is this: if I'm in a tournament, is that fish big enough to spend that kind of time on? Because if it is, then you got to get a bunch of different baits out. Now you got to play. You got to get a drop shot out. You got to get, a big jig out. You got to get something that's going to make that fish react. Once you find out in where it is in the bed that it wants that bait, every pitch you make goes there. And if the fish should leave for a second, just leave it there. Don't even move it. Just leave it there. And if it comes back and starts looking at it, tipping at it, just shake it a little bit, because it's going to come down and go, and they're not really eating it. They're just picking it up to get it out of there. And so you got to make sure when it picks it up, you set the hook, or you're going to snag it. But yeah,
it's all great information. And like I said, there's bits and pieces over the previous 190 day 4 with Frank Scalish's, to where if he talked about one thing that you'd like to learn more about, you can just go to YouTube and search it up, or you can go into the day 4 replays and search it up. We did, like I said, 3 weeks ago, where if you're saying, okay, well, where are these areas? That was a fantastic show. But this is kind of
that was good. So I got one other bait that's completely overlooked this time of year. Okay. Probably going to get a lot of hate mail in a minute.
Have you ever gotten any hate mail, Frank?
No, dude.
That's what I said. You're
I don't get hate mail. I'm just drawing something as quick as I can, so it's going to be a crappy drawing, but
yeah, still be better than anything I can do.
You guys could live with it.
I'm very curious if you're drawing a scenario, if you're drawing a lake, if you're drawing a bait.
I'm just drawing a lure for fun.
Oh, you're drawing a lure?
Yeah, for shits and giggles, man.
All right.
To coin Austin Powers. So probably one of the most overlooked springtime baits ever during the pre-spawn and spawn is a buzz bait.
Oh, you literally just drew that in 20 seconds?
Yeah.
Get out of here, Frank.
Yeah. So
oh my gosh.
So the buzz bait is probably one of the most overlooked, and it is a big fish catcher. So yeah, and it's a very fun time of year to throw a buzz bait, because when they eat it, like they annihilate it. So don't overlook the buzz bait. That's all I'm gonna tell you.
I mean, you're talking 50s in the water, 50 to 53 degree, and you want that thing to just do
right.
It's nice and slow.
Right. It's just going chip.
It's not a deal where you're blasting it across the surface. These are not fish that are chasing shad. They're not on bait fish. You're literally putting it over them, and they're grumpy because they're either cruising or about to spawn or on a bed, and they unload on it out of pure hatred.
Pure hatred. It's totally like in the summer when you honk a buzzbait, when you throw it out there. Yeah. You just make it so that blade just goes chirp, 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 chirp. And they crush it, man. They crush it. Oh, you're fantastic. Getting me amped up, man. I'm so bummed out.
It sounds like it's fantastic. We'll be back. Oh. So next Thursday, I'm going to be at the Masters, Frank.
Next Thursday?
Yeah, so that'll be the 10th. So we will have to do we'll do an on location show.
The 10th of.
We'll do it. We'll work around it. We'll do an on location show. We might end up We might end up with a special time for day 4.
Yeah, whatever you got.
If that works for you. We'll
whatever
talk.
You got to do. So okay, so the 10th. So the 10th's going to be a tricky ordeal. So I am going to have a little surgery done on my mouth, and guess when that is?
The 10th?
The 9th.
Okay, well we'll just skip that week, and then we'll be back on the 17th.
All right,
I'm out of town. You're having surgery, minor surgery. I'm hoping, like, you're all good.
Oh yeah. It's minor, but they assured me that I would definitely be in pain after.
Yeah, you don't want to talk for an hour and a half with gauze in your mouth, looking like a chipmunk.
Right. It's nothing major. Actually, well, at this point in time, I would have had the first part done by now. So it's crazy.
That was good. It's an exciting time of the year. I'd venture to say that there's a lot of people who consider this their favorite time of the year.
Oh yeah, everything is where you want it to be.
Especially up where you're in your neck of the woods. You're sitting there, you're going, okay, we're getting the boat. So the guys who winterize the boat, they're getting it unwinterized. Everything's, getting out. The tournament season's in full swing, whether you tournament fish or not. It doesn't take you 3 hours to get dressed to go outside if you want to fish. You just throw on a hoodie and a pair of shorts.
Or jeans, where I live.
Or jeans.
Amen to that.
Yeah. That was a good show. All right, this has been another edition of Day 4 with the man Frank SCALISH. We will talk to everyone later. See ya.
Adios.